G'day and welcome to the Bernie Gaynor Show on goodsource.news. We have another bumper episode for you today. But before we get into it, I'm after a little bit of help from you. Producing these episodes is fun and hopefully they're informative for you, but you can help spread the word out. If you're watching this on YouTube, please look at the links below this video. Go on, have a look now. They will tell you how to subscribe to the show, and you will also see just under this video a little thumbs up. Please go ahead and press it. That's it, just click on it. That says that you like this show. Now, if you're watching this show through goodsource.news, you will find little Twitter and Facebook icons on your page. That helps you spread this show on social media channels, and your effort doing this is very important to help us get the message out about goodsource.news and the important issues confronting Australia and the world today. But back into the show. As I said, it's another bumper episode. The US election is hotting up, and so are the lies and confusion. We'll also look at the latest secret attack from the LGBTwhatever crowd on freedom. And of course, we'll finish once again with the Goose of the Week award. Who will it be? Stay tuned. But we start, as always lately, with COVID-19. At the start of the year, most of us thought that we lived in a free nation. If on New Year's Eve you predicted that within a few weeks you would not be able to travel overseas, that Google and Facebook and Twitter would be censoring opinions about healthcare, and that Melburnians would be locked inside their homes every evening and forbidden from venturing more than 5 kilometres into the streets, people would have dismissed you as a wacky nut job. And if you told them that all of this would have happened because a grand total of less than 500 people in Australia had died, almost all of them over 70 and suffering from significant pre-existing health problems, people would have laughed at you. After all, more people died from the flu in 2019 in Australia than had died from the coronavirus in all of this year. That is a fact. And then if you told them on New Year's Eve that even once it became obvious that the Wuhan flu really was not such a massive deal, that governments in this nation would still have continued to impose harsh lockdowns, people would have started slowly edging away from you. And then if you told them that a large number of Australians would be applauding these restrictions and dobbing in their neighbours, they would have called the lunatic asylum. Yet all of this has happened. To put the coronavirus's real impact on Australians in some perspective, each year over 150,000 Australians die. How do I know? Well, it's on the Australian Bureau of Statistics website. Each day, approximately 432 Australians pass away. Of interest, that is about the same number of people who have died from coronavirus in the entirety of this year in Australia. Yet this is going on, these lockdowns are going on all over the world, and it's having a devastating impact. Last week, I spoke about the studies modelling a massive increase in suicide and the health statistics which demonstrate these models are probably and unfortunately accurate. Already, we are seeing a huge spike in hospitalisations for self-harm. Cruelly, we are now seeing elderly people, our mums and dads, at risk of suicide. In what has to be one of the saddest stories to emerge from the coronavirus, an elderly Canadian woman is now pleading to be allowed to euthanise herself because she has become depressed after being confined to her room for months. She was not even allowed out into the sunshine. LifeSite News reports that 78-year-old Shirley Turton is depressed, has lost interest in eating, is lonely, and has asked her family to arrange for her to be euthanised as a result of the lockdown. This is a short video shot by her daughter and posted online a few days ago.
So this is my mom, Shirley Turton, and she has a message for everybody.
And it says, a little message like this goes, please God help us. Those of us that can't help ourselves. And I'm afraid that's all that I want, is to be out in the sunshine, my family.
Please, let's find a way to make some change for these poor, beloved family members that are imprisoned in their rooms, not even allowed to go out into the sunshine and see the people that they love. Thank you for watching.
Shirley's daughter would rather look after her mum than have her killed, and that's normal, but she is frustrated that for a long period of time, visits were not allowed, and that she was only able to see her mother by peering at her through a window or the prison bars of a wrought iron fence. She says this has caused her mother to lose all hope. Now, restrictions have been eased a little for Shirley. She can now be visited every second day and in the morning. Unfortunately, her daughter also works full-time, so that is not really a solution. Now, the point of telling you this story is not just to make you feel sorry for Shirley Turton in Canada. It's to make you think, how many other elderly people around the world have been forced into a position where they believe that the only option they have in the wake of this virus is to kill themselves? Sure, I get it. Coronavirus is a thing and it is dangerous. But in a sensible world, the response to this danger would weigh its risk, the risk posed by draconian lockdowns, and the fact that people are social beings and need contact. Unfortunately, we do not live in a sensible world, so governments have imposed a cure that will see more people die in Australia by their own hand than from this disease, and that will also kill in other ways. And when people do die, for all the reasons that they do, they will often do so alone and cut off from their families. A Victorian family I spoke to this week has a horror tale to tell. Early on in this pandemic, the mother of a 3-month-old baby suffered an asthma attack. She was hospitalised. Her baby, who was being breastfed, was not allowed in the hospital with its mother. That little baby boy died that night, away from its mum. It is an unspeakable tragedy. That little boy's death is a result of the coronavirus, but it is not kept on the official lists. The government does not care enough about these deaths to keep track of them. More importantly, the government does not want you to know about them. How many more little boys are like that out there? We do not know the answer to that, but I think we all know that the number of deaths is probably a number that is far higher than the official coronavirus death toll. These lockdowns are killing us, and they will affect us in many other ways too. One insider I've spoken to this week, and this is in the news now, predicts that state border closures will have a dramatic impact on agriculture in Australia. Seasonal workers simply cannot move from one state to the next for the harvests. He expects the price of fresh food to skyrocket and supply to plummet over the coming weeks. This is no way to live. We cannot even travel overseas. How many Australians have planned the trip of a lifetime, a trip they jokingly would have said they would die for last year, and now cannot take it? How many Australians had decided to make such a trip because they know that if they do not take it this year, for whatever reason, maybe they've been diagnosed with terminal cancer and the coronavirus does not scare them, but they now cannot travel because a bureaucrat in Canberra has decided that they know what is best for the rest of us. The worst thing about coronavirus is not what it does to a human body. It is what it has done to the soul of our nation. We now have governments that decide where you can go, what you can do, how you can work, and even what medical care you must have. Just watch this.
Australia's Deputy Chief Health Officer Dr Nick Coatsworth held a press conference yesterday, and he was saying that restrictions could be placed on people who don't get vaccinated.
There needs to be some sort of incentive stick, perhaps, through the current programs, including No Jab, No Pay, looking at specific things like not being able to go into restaurants, not being able to travel internationally, not being able to catch public transport.
Vaccinations, we are told, won't be mandatory. We all know that's a lie because we are being warned now that unless you voluntarily accept one, you will simply not be able to live. This should concern every one of us. This is not about whether vaccines work or are safe, and being a former army officer, I receive more needles than pretty much anyone I know. This is about whether we can live freely in a nation where the government has this much control over our lives. It's pretty simple. We can't. And if the government is already talking like this, you can bet your bottom dollar that whatever the new normal is, and whenever it comes, it will involve the government interfering in our lives in other ways as well, regardless of how many people its insane and draconian rules end up killing. It's less than 3 months to the US election, and last week was the Democratic National Convention. It's when all the big wigs on Joe Biden's team line up to outline their plan and to criticise President Trump. One of them was Chris Cuomo, the governor of New York. This is part of what he had to say.
Our current federal government is dysfunctional and incompetent. It couldn't fight off the virus. In fact, it didn't even see it coming. The European virus infected the Northeast while the White House was still fixated on China.
Did you get that? I'll play it again.
The European virus infected the Northeast while the White House was still fixated on China.
Yep, according to the Democrats, we are struggling to fight against the European virus, and this is the party that is currently leading the polls and looks set to oust Donald Trump. No wonder these have been described as peaceful protests. The Democratic Party is insane. There really is no other way to describe it. Unlike the Democrats, Donald Trump is not insane. Watch.
Why do you keep calling this the Chinese virus? There are reports of dozens of incidents of bias against Chinese Americans in this country. Your own aide, Secretary Azar, says he does not use this term. He says ethnicity does not cause the virus. Why do you keep using this? A lot of people say it's racist.
It's not racist at all, no, not at all. It comes from China. That's why. It comes from China. I want to be accurate.
But just because Donald Trump is not insane, that does not mean that President Trump and the Republicans have all the answers. They do not. This is how one of President Trump's latest campaign videos starts.
President Trump is the most pro-gay president in American history.
It goes on this way.
Donald Trump is the first president in American history to be pro-gay marriage from his first day in office.
Now, Donald Trump personally retweeted this campaign advertisement, adding that it was his great honour. This ad really highlights the problem with conservative politics. It is fractured and in many ways incoherent. Conservatives will never succeed when they normalise concepts such as homosexual marriage. Donald Trump is far, far better than Joe Biden, but normality will not return under the leadership of a man who supports this revolutionary attack on the family unit. Those who have been following me will know that for the better part of the last decade, I've been wrapped up in litigation from an LGBT anti-free speech activist. Gary Burns is his name. Now, he has boasted that he lodged complaints to bankrupt me, and he lodged 37 of them. Not a single complaint succeeded, but it has cost me in excess of $400,000 to defend myself. I am proud that I defended myself, and I thank all those who supported me in that fight. I could not have done so without your assistance. A key part of that fight was whether you could be dragged into New South Wales for expressing your views somewhere else in Australia. That fight is still going on, but it does turn out that you cannot be dragged before the New South Wales Tribunal for your views. That was an important win for many reasons, not least of all because it has since been proven that key members of the New South Wales Tribunal are anything but impartial. They like to fundraise for homosexual lobby groups while presiding over matters in which those lobby groups act. Now, my particular battle is still ongoing, but there are only 4 complaints left. So far, it has been a 33-zip defeat of the insanely mad, always angry, and forever offended LGBT activists. That's not a very good result for them, although they just don't care. They know that even if you don't win, the process is the punishment, and it is enough to force most people into silence. But to their credit, these people don't give up, ever. They are desperately attempting to obtain the power to prosecute people for the things they say in one state under laws from another. If they do obtain this power, then no one in this nation will be safe. You will not know what laws to obey, and you will never know when or where they might come after you. If we do end up in that world, there will be no way of knowing what you can or can't say. So the only real option any of us will have is not to say anything at all. Right now, there is another case unfolding in the Australian Capital Territory that is, once again, attempting to set this dangerous precedent. Of greater concern, the details of this case are suppressed. The Australian Capital Territory's Tribunal's website lists the case number and the date and time for the direction hearing of this case, but it does not name the complainant, nor does it name the defendants. I understand that efforts are even underway to prevent any comment at all about what this case is even about. I hope that I can tell you more next week. If I can, I will. Now, this is an important case. That should be obvious. The last thing any normal Australian wants is for the activists in Canberra to succeed in setting a precedent where you can be dragged into the nation's capital to answer for your views on marriage under ACT law in a process that is entirely secret. And if you want to know what type of laws Canberrans live under, consider these words from the explanatory memorandum for the recently introduced Sexuality and Gender Identity Conversion Practices Bill 2020. If passed, this bill could see parents sent to jail if they don't support their 5-year-old transitioning gender after coming home from preschool indoctrination. The explanatory memorandum for this bill states, the bill limits the right to freedom of thought, conscience, religion and belief, Section 14, freedom of expression, Section 16, the right to freedom of movement, Section 13, the right to parents to ensure the religious and moral education of a child in conformity with their convictions, Section 27A, and the right to privacy, Section 12. They're not my words, they are the words from the explanatory memorandum. That's a lot of freedom that this bill will eliminate. It's all being done to appease the gay activists. And that's a good way to lead into this week's Goose of the Week. Queensland has just passed its own version of this law. All those gay conversion therapists out there are now criminals in the Sunshine State, although it does turn out that probably the only people this law will catch are doctors who don't think removing breasts or genitals is all that great an idea. Anyway, Health Minister Stephen Miles said this during the debate.
Being LGBTIQ is not an affliction or a disease that requires medical treatment.
He also said this.
Of course, no treatment or practice can change a person's sexual attraction or experience of gender. And so it is no surprise that survivors of conversion therapy report experiencing deep feelings of shame, alienation, and hopelessness, often resulting in symptoms of depression, anxiety, and thoughts of suicide or self-harm.
Stephen Miles said these words with a sombre, straight face while passing a law that explicitly protects those who encourage people to change or suppress their gender via artificial hormones or surgery that mutilates or removes their genitalia. This process is conducted in Queensland hospitals and is commonly known as sex change surgery. That is the real gender therapy conversion that is going on in Australia at the moment. Stephen Miles is clearly a dead set goose and is this week's winner. Give him a round of applause. That's it for my show today. Please, if you haven't already, subscribe to goodsource.news, like its Facebook page, follow it on Twitter, and check out some of the content that's on there at the moment. I highly recommend the James McPherson show. If you are getting down with all the bad news on in the world, have a listen to him, because sometimes all you can do is laugh at the insanity, and he will help you do that.
The Bernard Gaynor Show is a production of The Good Source, hosted by Bernard Gaynor. To watch, listen to, or read more content without the SJW PC fact filter, visit goodsource.news, good SAUCE.news. Become a Good Source supporter for exclusive access to live and unedited interview recordings, including the conversations before and after the show.